Hello and welcome to this live episode of the podcast. Hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear and there won't be too many technical glitches this evening. Hopefully none at all, but you can never be too certain. Anyway, why I am streaming this live, and also you may watch it on the recording if it records okay, is because you will probably be aware that not only has the UK government, headed up by Kier Starmer, signed, or at least in the process of signing, I don't think they've shaken hands yet, a trade agreement with India. And I said in a previous video, this has caused some unrest in some quarters. Other people are pretty pleased with it, and I've tried to be rational and balanced in what I've said about it because I believe that there are some good things in it, but it still leaves a bit of a sour taste. And that's putting it mildly in terms of what some other people think. However, again, to be balanced, it's fair to say, I believe, that some individuals believe that it is a good agreement. And hot on the heels of that, we hear that Kier Starmer has also, or is about to, reach some kind of trade agreement with the US, which in the grand scheme of things is probably the more important of the two. I'm not an economist, but I'm guessing that it is. And once more, what we need to figure out is, what the small print will be. Certainly in terms of the agreement with India, I'm really not sure about that right now. And of course, in terms of the agreement with the US, some MPs are saying we need to make sure that we don't subsidise tech billionaires, and that, of course, the NHS is protected. And I think those statements are very wise. And in terms particularly of the US deal, there is a request, a demand, in fact, that it is discussed in Parliament, which I think is a very, very good idea. But even with that US deal, and even with the pending US deal and the pending deal with India, there's just this sense of, I think with quite a few people, malaise, almost unease. And I thought I'd share with you one of the reasons that I think that could be happening. I mentioned before control and a sense of being ignored almost, not really having a say in the running of things. And yes, I know we're a democracy. We vote in people to run the country, albeit in this case, a lot of that was a kind of springboard from the disillusionment with the Tories. Yes, it was. That is true. But we kind of have to not agree with, but be aware that this government is the one that in our electoral system was put into power. However, that doesn't mean to say that pressure shouldn't be brought to bear. It doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be saying, hold on a second, you need to be held to account for some things, because as I've also said before, there is very much a sense of them and us, the in-group and the out-group. There's very much a sense that what the real concerns of people are, or a lot of them, at least a lot of the concerns and a lot of the people, are not really being addressed. And in fact, it is, to quote from somebody recently who was talking about Kier Starmer saying, I get it, after the local elections in England, the drubbing, I get it, that he was tin-eared. It was a tin-eared response, and that's one way of putting it. So what about this little diagram here then? You may well recognise it as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, first thing to put in is that it's not always going to be a hierarchy, and some people think there should be other things in that model, and the importance and weighting of each of the levels or stages or areas is going to be different from person to person, and I agree with all of that. We do Maslow's thinking in terms of this model an awful lot in terms of appreciating what he has done. We owe him an awful lot in terms of what he has done, because this model has actually informed different ways of thinking. And I would suggest, and I believe that Martin Seligman, who was at one point the American Psychological Association president, and he also drove the whole positive psychology movement, which has grown arms and legs. And I believe that it owes a great debt to Maslow. It's a roundabout way of getting to what I was trying to say. So even though it's a simple model and you've probably seen it, there are times when it is worthwhile, I believe, considering what's in said model. Because if you think about this and you consider that, yes, we're all different, we all want different things, we're all at different stages in our lives, and also we probably would disagree in some of the detail, and we might not rank it this way. So again, let's not say it has to be a hierarchy, but let's just look at the different areas. So down the bottom, you will see physiological needs: breathing, food, water, the most basic necessities for life. Would you add heat in there? Would heating be useful? Not necessarily in the UK at this time of year, but certainly in the winter. Do you think that would be a good idea? Particularly if someone was older, feeling the cold a lot more, could be really dangerous for them. So, are they getting that? And do you feel that your basic physiological needs are being met? Is the water clean? Are the beaches clean? How's your drinking water? How many chemicals are in it? What about this idea that maybe what you need to bear in mind is how much you feel safe, how often? Because then we can look at safety, which is just the one above. Again, in no particular order. So safety, employment. That's interesting, isn't it? Employment. Do you feel that businesses are being penalised in the UK or not? And one of the, let's say, the annoyances that people had with the agreement proposed with India is that it looked like a lot of workers from India wouldn't be paying national insurance. And I come back to, again, that maybe there's good reason for that. Maybe it will balance itself out. But people are emotional creatures, or a lot of them are. That doesn't mean to say overly emotional, but if we have empathy, then we also care. And if we care about our families, and we care about the vulnerable, we care about heating the pensioners. So if those basic needs, the physiological needs are not being met, and the basic needs of safety, like employment, feel under threat, then you can see why people might have gotten annoyed about that. Now, again, we need to figure out what the fine print actually is. But penalising farmers, penalising the businesses in terms of national insurance contributions, is that good? Does that challenge our need for safety? I'd suggest that it does. And again, the basics like heat, does it challenge the physiological needs of the population or of many of us? Yes, I would suggest that it does. And then what about love and belonging? And you may be saying, well, hold on a second. I don't need to love a government. I don't need to feel like I belong to a government. I would agree. But do you think that our communities are actually more cohesive these days or less? And why might that be? And it's easy to say, well, it's that group over there, this group over there. Or could it be that the focus that we appear to be continually being fed about difference may be driving some of those things? And here's another way to consider love, belonging, connection. Do you feel that you are part of the same group at all as, let's say, many people in Parliament? Or again, does it feel a bit them and us? Does it feel a bit elitist? Do any of them have the so-called common touch, does, in fact, Kier Starmer have that so-called common touch, that ability to make us feel that we're all in this together, that ability to reach out and say, hey, yeah, I know how you're feeling, and here's why. But no, we get, I get it, whilst ignoring, it would seem, what people hoped he would get. And as I've said before, saying, I'm not going to give you a standard reply, and then giving a standard reply. Well, when governments are new and local elections come along, then often there is dissatisfaction. That's true, but I think this dissatisfaction is pretty high here. And then we have esteem, confidence, respect. Do you think that the government respects you? Do you get that feeling? Do you get the feeling that you're being told what to do and told what to think, and also told what you can't say? And there are levels to those, and there are points beyond which I think we shouldn't go. And I also understand that we have to have certain safeguards and checks and balances. But when you begin to pile all of this stuff on top of itself, it begins to become a bit of a heavy, wearisome burden. And I think that's how people are feeling. They were weary after the Conservatives, hoping the slight embers of hope dashed pretty quickly with the free gifts and the not keeping the promises. And now it seems to be, we're just going to do what we want. You're going to be told what to do because, hey, we were voted in. Again, there's a bit of background to that. Always remember that, Labour Party. We were voted in and we're here to stabilise things. What does that mean? Exactly. Yes, waiting lists. Good. Glad you're tackling that. But what else? What else are you stabilising? And stabilising against the horror of the billions of pounds black hole. It's kind of carte blanche, isn't it, to say anything? That's woolly political language. It doesn't mean a darn thing. It's just words. We meant to fill in the blanks. It's kind of hypnotic language that some people favour. And, again, do you feel that connection, that respect? And then at the top, self-actualization. Now, I think self-actualization, well, it can mean many things to many different people, but essentially I would suggest that self-actualization is, or one way to describe it is to feel that we are on the road towards, or perhaps even achieving our full potential in that moment, in that month, in that year, on that day. We have the tools, the capability, the resources to get there. Do you feel that you're being helped, or do you feel that you're being hindered? And self-actualization is a journey that I believe that all of us are on, but sometimes we get stymied along the way. Sometimes we get pushed back. Do you feel enabled by this government, or do you feel restrained and constricted? And it's not to say that they're not doing things that they need to do, that they should do, and some of those things can feel restricted and restrictive. But when that happens with all that other stuff going on, and you consider it through the lens of those needs, and there are more than those, I've said as well, control, for example, the need to feel that we're being listened to. But when you put all those Maslowian needs together, and think of the government and the situation that we find ourselves in right now, I think that most, if not all of them, they're not being met, or not being met in an optimum fashion for an awful lot of people. And then when you consider that the deal with India and even the deal with the US, this is why people are not, or a lot of people are not jumping up and down feeling thrilled. They're already going, what is this really about? Because there's that lack of trust. There's that divide, the elite and the plebs. And there's that sense of what else is going on, because I don't feel you're being straight with me, because I don't trust you. And I don't trust you because you broke promises. And I don't think you're being straight because you kept quiet in opposition. And you've kept quiet a lot of the time when you've been in number 10. Only saying something when you decided that something need clamped down upon. Hopefully you can get what I'm saying here, that then when we look at the US and we consider that deal, and by the way, thank goodness there is some kind of deal, we all probably should look at the small print in a way that we wouldn't have done before. Now, luckily, the US president likes the UK. Luckily. Notice also, you may have read this, that it says Kier Starmer worked really hard to develop a close and warm relationship with Donald Trump. And I think he did. I think he did. And hats off, credit where credit is due. You could even see it in the photographs, smiling. It looked pretty much like a Duchenne smile, a real smile, rosy cheeks, in the cozy office, in a cozy meeting, in the cozy White House. It looked great. It was nice to see. But probably stuck in the craw of a lot of people, that smile doesn't seem to be broadcast to the populace. That smile doesn't seem to be broadcast to businesses and the hard-working people in this country. That smile is missing because, again, what Kier is interested in my opinion, is much more to do with outside the country. It's connecting and setting up some bits and pieces behind the scenes. And to be fair, like trade deals, and you may be saying, well, hold on a second, are you saying he shouldn't do that? No, I'm not saying he shouldn't do that. I'm saying that governments can do more than one thing at once. And I think he hasn't paid enough attention to the real concerns, the real needs of the population. And he needs to do that pretty darned quickly, because morale is plummeting. And when you think about self-actualization, another way to think about self-actualization is a sense of being fulfilled, of feeling good in one's self. There may still be striving, there may still be seeking, but there's probably hope. And with hope tends to come higher morale. And do you feel hope? Are we being given a message of hope? What is the message of this government? What does Kier represent? It's very difficult to say. Again, I've said this before. A lot of people have said it before. Who is this individual? It's like little snapshots you get here and there. And I really believe there has to be a coherent message that addresses the needs of the nation, that addresses those emotional needs, because people right now need some kind of emotional buy-in. They need morale to be raised. They need to feel that things are being boosted and heading in the right direction. And yes, you may say, in defence of Kier, or in defence of the Labour Party, of which, by the way, there are good people within. Let's not forget that. There are good people in government, in positions of influence. But unfortunately, the people who are at the so-called top seem to be disconnected emotionally. They seem to be a little bit devoid of true empathy. And maybe I'm misreading it. I really hope I am. But the delivery, the approach, the mechanistic, the robotic way of communicating is worrying. It always has been. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. But let's, however, attempt to be hopeful ourselves and look at this deal with India, find out what the small print actually says, and consider whether there are at least some good things within it. And let's also consider and look at the small print, the deal with the US, and hope that there are good things within it. Again, I am slightly more optimistic because the US president likes the UK, as I've said before. Thank goodness for that. And thank goodness that Kier actually managed to turn on the charm. But if you can do it for the US president, Kier, what about doing it for those poor people, beleaguered and a bit sad and slightly irritated in the country?